Now, we're going to start talking about Pirandello. The theme, in a way, of this play is illusion. One of my favorite quotations, drama is action, sir, action, and not confounded philosophy. But what we're going to see is that this is actually a very philosophical play. It's somewhat surprising, right? 6 characters in search of an author. You expect a normal sort of play, that's not what you get at all. Characters come wandering in, looking to tell their story, looking for an author. But they already have a story that they want to tell, and the whole play gets, or at least the play that they are planning to put on gets disrupted by these characters who simply wander in and want to tell their story. The author, Luigi Pirandello, is an Italian dramatist. He was born, appropriately enough, in a town called Chaos, Sicily. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1934 for plays like this that were really groundbreaking and shook things up. He is often associated with Eugene Ionesco, who was a French playwright who had a similar kind of attitude about breaking the boundaries of what people had considered the dramatic arts. Well, this play in particular was written in 1921, just after the war. It was written in the same year as Wittgenstein's Tractatus, as Eliot's The Wasteland. It is something that provoked a very strong reaction among people. It was shown in Rome, and the result was a riot. And I don't mean a ha-ha riot, I mean a literal riot. People were furious. They began destroying the theater. However, it was shown in Milan and was a great success, and then spread from there to other cities in Italy and eventually throughout Europe and the United States as actually a rather popular play to produce. Partly because once you realize what it is and you lower your, I don't want to say you lower your expectations, you change your expectations. You realize you're in for something experimental and surprising. Then people found it actually quite funny. Here is one production of it. Where the director is shouting at them, "You're doing it wrong." What are the themes in Pirandello? Not only in this play, but in others of his works. One theme is disappointment. And I think it's possible to appreciate this in part by thinking about Italy's contributions in the First World War, if I can put it that way. Remember I showed you a chart of some of the major battles. And on that chart were things like 10th Isonzo, 11th Isonzo, and so on. There were battles over the Isonzo River all throughout the war. Tens of thousands of Italians were losing their lives in each of those battles, and as it suggests by the fact that it was the same name throughout all of them, the lines never moved. The Austrians would attack the Italians would attack the Austrians. Essentially nothing happened except massive loss of life on both sides throughout the war. The Italian front remained largely stable. Periodically people thought, oh, we can actually push the Italians back or the Austrians back. Nothing ever worked. And so in the end, it was really utterly fruitless loss of life. A second theme is bankruptcy of social norms. He thinks that we operate by a large number of social norms, some of them explicitly ethical, but a lot of them matters of etiquette or manners or social expectations. And he sees a lot of this as ridiculous, as not really going anywhere, not resting on any foundation. In fact, a kind of artificial construct that we use that obscures, if anything, the real nature of life. Another thing, hopeless emptiness. He thinks that our lives, once we strip away those manners, those social norms, those artifices, really turn out to be empty. There isn't a lot to them, and there isn't a lot of hope. Now, there's something else he sees, which is why I've put him together this week with Freud. He thinks that in the end, when you strip away these things that we consider reasonable, these norms, these expectations of behavior, there's really nothing left. We get emptiness, but also we see that the underlying structure of reality and the underlying nature of ourselves is simply irrational. There is no order underlying it. So you might think, take off the order of the surface and you see the order beneath. He says, no. What you see is that it's utterly irrational underneath. There really isn't any order. There isn't any structure. In fact, to the extent that you try to understand the true nature of the world and the true nature of the self, you end up getting led into contradictions. It turns out that there really isn't any coherent view you can have of what the world is like or of who you are. And so we have to throw ideas of objectivity, of predictability, of regularities out the window. The world really isn't very predictable. It isn't orderly. It isn't very regular. It isn't very objective, even though we tend to think it is. Now, of course, again, you can attribute this to the end of the First World War, the feeling of overwhelming irrationality, senseless slaughter. You can end up thinking that a terrible, terrible event occurred that nobody predicted and that nobody wanted. And so it's easy to understand this as a reaction to the war. But I think Pirandello thinks, look, it's not just that I'm depressed because the war's gone badly because of all this senseless slaughter. I think he thinks he has seen into the heart of things. He's seen what underlies ordinary social structures and constraints, and the answer is nothing that makes any sense whatsoever. The true nature of the world is utterly irrational. Yeah. Okay, what about ourselves? If the world doesn't make any sense, well, neither do we, really. There is no clear identity to the self. Who are you, really? Okay? That's not an easy question under any circumstances, but it's especially difficult once you start seeing all these social constructs, all these roles we play, as really being artificial in some sense. Who are you? Suppose I ask that question, and I mean it seriously. Who are you exactly? I mean, maybe nobody luckily asked this question in ordinary life, but back when I was in college, people sometimes did. I mean, that was the crazy 70s when anything was possible. But anyway, you know, suppose somebody actually were talking to you and said, well, who are you? You said, you know, I'm Freddie Jones, whatever. And then, well, I don't mean that. Is that the name of the killer? Anyway, I don't mean some killer. I just mean, you know, here, I'm blah, blah, blah. And then they say, well, who are you really, right? Maybe this is the kind of question that gets asked at church youth camps or something. I don't know, I never went to church youth camps, but I sort of imagine what goes on there. Anyway, suppose you get asked this. So who are you really? What would you say? What kind of thing could you appeal to? Yeah.
I am that I am.
Oh, you're God. I am what I am. Yeah, that's a famous response to this question. What else could you say? Well, is it who I always am or who I am today? Well, let's suppose it's not some big, momentous, deep down thing. Suppose I simply introduce myself. I say, hi, I'm Dan Bonbeck. Who are you? Just looks at me like I'm an idiot. Okay, let me try with someone else. Hi, I'm Dan Bonbeck. Who are you?
I'm Miles Hudson. Nice to meet
Miles.
you.
Great, Miles. So tell me about yourself.
Well, I like a lot of different activities. I work for the Daily Texan. Do you want me to keep
Good.
going?
No, he tells me about activities he likes. He works for the Daily Texan. He's a student at UT, right? He says the sort of thing like that. If I'm introduced to somebody, they say, tell me about yourself. I'm a professor at UT, blah, 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 right? I tell them what I do, maybe as a profession. I tell them about my hobbies. Now notice what's going on here is that we identify ourselves in terms of certain social roles and in terms of certain activities we like to participate in. So I tell you I'm a professor, or you tell me you're a student, and then you say I do this and I do that, and so I say, you know, if we go beyond this professor thing, I say maybe, well, I play bass guitar and I play piano, blah, 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 blah. And so I tell you something, I have 26 cats, and if we go deep enough, and then you think, oh my gosh, maybe move on to the next person. But this is the kind of thing where we talk about these sort of things. We talk about what we do, what we enjoy doing, what our hobbies are, maybe whether you're married or not, whether you have brothers or sisters, whether you have children, all of this kind of thing. But does any of that really grasp who you truly are? He ends up saying, no, that really talks about what you do, what roles you
Those are
play.
only attributes of you, but they don't really describe like what like what you value, or I guess that would make that kind of determines you, or what you value, or like what what you strive for, and things like that. But those are kind of intangibles.
Ooh, well, good. We might say, yeah, maybe we could get deeper if we talked about what you really strive for, what you value, what you care about, what your goals are. And so that might be something that tells me more about you, that you're a student at UT, okay, fine, that tells me a certain amount. But if I say, well, what do you really want to do? I mean, when you're my age, what do you hope you'll be doing? Or something, or the famous interview question. So 5 or 10 years from now, what do you want to be doing? I mean, that's the sort of thing that may tell us a bit more about what you want to be, at least. But, yes, go ahead.
But you're not your job, and you're not what you want. If you're defining yourself as just what are you or who are you, I don't think that you define yourself by things that you desire or just like what you do. He's asking who are you, not what you do.
Okay, good. He's asking who are you, not what do you want, what are you doing, what do you hope to do. After all, none of those things really capture who you are. Are you really just a professor or a student or an accountant or a musician or this or that or the other thing? Well, no, right? You're more than just that. You're more than any particular role you play. You're more than all of those activities bundled together. You're more than what you want or what you hope to be or what you strive for.
But I think when people share what they do, they're not sharing it because they want to say, oh, I'm music production unit, blah, blah, blah. They're trying to share their personality, and they can't find a way to verbalize it on a deeper level, at least quickly.
No, that's true. That's true. And so this is a sort of hint to what we are. And you might say, well, look, what are you really looking for? I don't know what I can say.
I'm an artist.
Okay, maybe, I am an artist, or I am the Führer, or, I don't know. It seems to me one could say, look, here's why it's so hard to answer this question of who I am. I can talk about what I want. I can talk about who I am associated with, who I'm married to, who my children are, blah, blah, blah. I can talk about maybe what I do, what I spend my time on, what my dreams are. But none of those things really capture exactly who I am. And in fact, his worry is that all of those are sort of artificial. Do they really reveal the true nature of you? Now, he's concerned that actually there isn't any true nature of you. That's why we answer it this way. There's no other answer we can give. Who am I really? Well, there's no answer to that question. He says, look, the conscious mind in general is a sort of mask over a very mysterious multiplicity. Again, we see the similarity to Freud. For Freud, the conscious mind is something like a mask over this bubbling cauldron of desire that is there in the subconscious. The same thing is true in Pirandello. He doesn't really have a theory of it. In fact, he seems to imply there can't be a theory of it. It's a contradictory mess. Nevertheless, there's this mysterious cauldron of personality beneath us. The conscious mind is simply something we construct on top of that to try to make sense of something that ultimately doesn't make any sense. So he sees the self as plastic, as highly malleable, as something that changes depending on our needs as we go through life. It adapts to circumstances, it adapts to these unconscious desires. There's no one perspective that tells us who we are. At best, we can adopt multiple perspectives. There are lots of different masks we use, lots of different roles we play, lots of different things we think about ourselves and ways we think about ourselves. And really, all of those are to some extent an illusion. No one of them captures things correctly. Even all taken together, they do a very partial job, and to some extent an illusory job of revealing our true nature, which is something that can't really be understood. So, once he was asked, what is the basic theme of your plays? What are you really trying to communicate? And here's how he answered. I think that life is a very sad piece of buffoonery, because we have in ourselves, without being able to know why, wherefore, or whence, the need to deceive ourselves constantly by creating a reality, one for each, and never the same for all, which from time to time is discovered to be vain and illusory. So in other words, we construct this mask, this illusion, and we try to hide the true nature of ourselves from ourselves. Occasionally, however, the mask slips, and we realize this is vain, we realize this is an illusion. He says, my art is full of bitter compassion, notice, for all those who deceive themselves. But this compassion cannot fail to be followed by the ferocious derision of destiny, which condemns man to deception. So he sees us as forced to hide the true nature of reality from ourselves, as forced to hide the true nature of ourselves from ourselves, because the truth is too horrible to look at. And really, because I think in the end it's contradictory, it's irrational, it is unintelligible. Now, clearly here, there's a form of two-level theory. You knew this slide was coming at some point, right? The conscious mind is this higher level thing. It is a set of masks, a set of illusions that we construct. Basically, it is the level of appearance which hides this intolerable subconscious reality. Now, if we think about the world and its true nature, it's really unintelligible. When we look at ourselves or other people, we realize it's not just unintelligible. Yes, it is unintelligible, but it's worse than that. It's really intolerable. We cannot bear to look at ourselves, or for that matter, at the true nature of anybody else, fully and accurately. Okay? It is unbearable. It is not only unintelligible, it is horrible. There is no meaning that anything intrinsically has. We are the authors of our own realities. Okay? We give life our own meanings to it, but all those meanings are in some sense an illusion. What do you really care about? you will find yourself caring deeply about all sorts of things as you go through the next few years. You know, how you do in certain courses, or whether you get into a graduate program, or whether you get a job, or whether so-and-so likes you, and blah, 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 blah. All of this sort of thing will seem immensely meaningful. But step back and what difference does it really make? Actually, we're the ones giving it meaning. It doesn't have any intrinsic meaning of its own. Yes?
So is he regarded as like an existentialist?
That's right, he is an existentialist. This is still in an early stage before people have really developed existentialism much as a philosophical theory. But nevertheless, you're absolutely right. This goes into that existentialist camp. He can be viewed as a sort of early, kind of proto-existentialist for having these themes. And these are themes that later people like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus and others developed much more extensively. But absolutely right. He's saying, look, we give things our own meaning. The world doesn't have any meaning intrinsically. We assign it meaning by adopting certain projects. But at certain points, and here's maybe the difference between him and later existentialists, he thinks we can't keep sustaining those meanings. At certain points, well, maybe this isn't really a difference. It's the idea of the absurd. The mask slips, and we recognize the absurdity of what we've done. We recognize the meaninglessness of the universe and the fact that our own attempt to make all of this make sense is really an illusion. And so, in a sense, we inevitably confront the absurdity of our own attempts to give life meaning. The mask slips, as he puts it. We have to confront the truth, but we can bear to confront it only up to a point. Okay? So we cannot really fully face it. People like Sartre and Camus later think it's vital that we face the true nature of existence and recognize it and understand our true situation. Pirandello is in effect saying, we get glimpses of it, but the fact is we cover up as quickly as we can, and we have to. We can't bear to face it. Well, here is an image of the characters who are in search of an author. That's one representation of what this odd family might look like. Now, that does bring us into contact with this idea of absurdity, of the mask slipping, of seeing through to the real nature of reality and quickly recognizing it's not something that makes any sense. It doesn't have the meaning we thought it has. It doesn't have the value that we thought it had. It's in fact something that turns out to be strange, foreign to us, something that we can't even bear to look at. Now, the absurdity, of course, runs all throughout the play. Here's an early stage. The leading man says to the manager, "Excuse me, but must I absolutely wear a cook's cap?" The manager, annoyed, "Well, I imagine so. It says so there anyway." He points to the book, the script. The leading man says, "But it's ridiculous." Now, the manager jumps up in a rage. "Ridiculous, ridiculous. Is it my fault if France won't send us any more good comedies? And we're reduced to putting on Pirandello's works, where nobody understands anything and where the author plays the fool of us all?" Okay. So it's sort of, that's one of the things that's jarring, right? People come in expecting to watch a play, expecting to have this illusion sustained, but the illusion doesn't get sustained here. The mask slips. Here the people are talking about putting on Pirandello's play. Of course, that's awful because those plays don't make any sense. But what are you going to do? There aren't any good French comedies being written anymore. Now, there's an idea of representation. And part of what this play is about is not just life and the self and all those big important themes, but also the nature of art, the nature of plays, the nature of literature in general. The traditional view is that it's representational, that this is a representation of reality. But that's an idea, too, that gets played with you. The actors grin. The manager goes to the leading man and shouts, "Yes, sir, you put on the cook's cap and beat eggs. Do you suppose that with all this egg-beating business, you're on an ordinary stage? Get that out of your head. You represent the shell of the eggs you're beating." Okay, and the actors all crack up. Get it? Crack up shell. Yeah, sorry. Now, silence. Listen to my explanations, please. And he says to the leading man, "The empty form of reason without the fullness of instinct, which is blind." Ha! You stand for reason, your wife is instinct. It's a mixing up of the parts, according to which you who act your own part become the puppet of yourself. Do you understand? I'm hanged if I do. Well, neither do I. But let's get on with it. It's sure to be a glorious failure anyway. Now, what does he actually say? The empty form of reason without the fullness of instinct, which is blind. First of all, that's not a sentence, right? This is not a mistranslation. It's a sentence fragment. So already, it's not really quite fully a thought. But does it have any content at all? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but it kind of reminds me of Hume in that without instinct, reason, energy.
Ooh, okay, yes. It might remind you of Hume, who says, look, reason doesn't have any motivating power. Reason is empty. It's instinct. It's passion that gives us motivating power.
And then you tie back to the cauldron and then consciousness's attempts to build something out of that, or at least mask that.
Good. So exactly, this ties back to the two-level idea. The fact that reason is up here on the top level. It's not really responsible for moving the whole structure. It's something that is really an empty form. It's instinct. It is that lower level, this irrational cauldron. That's what's really doing things. But it's blind. It's irrational. It doesn't make any sense on its own terms.
I was just gonna be like, yeah, he says instinct is blind, which is pretty straightforward, but you said it so wrong.
Well, okay,
You got
yes.
it first, like.
No, good. Good. Instinct is blind. Now, in what sense is it blind? What does it mean to say that it's blind?
It has no, like, I mean, it doesn't have rationale, it's just what we do these things without knowing why we do them, it's just instinctual. Like, our animals do things without knowing why they do it, they just do it. And it's kind of a blind way of going about doing things, it's kind of weird.
Good.
to think about it.
All right, good. We do things without knowing why we do them. Exactly. And notice here, this is, again, a little bit different from Freud. Freud says, I can tell you what dreams mean. I can interpret them. I can tell you how they fit in with your waking life. What do you think Pirandello would say in response to that? That's crazy, exactly. No, you can't. There's no way to understand the subconscious. There's no way to understand what that dream is doing or what that desire is doing. There's no way to really understand its source. There's no way to really understand how it relates to waking life and to, in other words, these rational constructs we have. There's presumably some relationship, but it's a mysterious one. It's not one that is transparent to us. And so the idea here, in a way, is, look, you're being driven by something that is really blind, that doesn't make any sense, that's quite unintelligent. And so where Freud says, I can give you a theory of all this, Pirandello says, I can't give you a theory of this. In fact, do we understand? No. We're hanged if we do. Okay? This is not something that we can really make any sense of. I can't give you a theory of that cauldron. I can't give you a theory of how it relates to your conscious mind, because the fact is it doesn't make any sense. It's full of contradictions. Now, what does he mean, you, who act your own part, become the puppet of yourself? What does it mean, I am my own puppet?
Is it religious, kind of?
Well, religious, how so?
He kind of dictates his own actions. He doesn't really look forward, like, there's no ruler that's guiding him. It's kind of like he kind of dictates himself.
Yeah, okay. Partly he does feel separate from his own actions, right? We ordinarily think, look, I'm an agent. I'm the one doing things. I'm the one speaking and moving my hands ridiculously and so on. But after all, it may be if I feel alienated from my own actions, I feel the sense of absurdity, then I say, hold on a second, there's this animal in front of a room behaving in various ways, saying various things, but is that me? Well, you could imagine me pulling the strings of this animal, making the animal do what it does, and yet it's not exactly me. I am having to act my own part. That's what the characters come in and do, right? They act their own parts. In effect, he's saying that's what all of us do in life. We act our own parts, but am I just the consequence? No, in effect, we're all actors on a stage. All the world's a stage, okay? And all of us are merely players. Yeah, it's an old sort of Shakespearean idea, but in a certain sense, he's saying that's really right. It's not just that he's concerned with representation on a stage and the nature of art. He's saying we're all in that position. We're all acting our own parts on the stage of life. And in all cases, there is this sense in which we're puppets of ourselves. We can isolate part of us that's sort of doing the puppet mastering from the part that is actually going through the puppetry. Now, often we're doing this unreflectively. We aren't really aware of that separation. But sometimes we're painfully aware of that separation. Give me an example of some occasions where you really feel that distance from yourself.
Yeah, well, I guess like, when you're in certain social situations, you are aware of like the role you're supposed to play within a group. Like, I mean, say if you have a group of friends that you're friends with from high school, and you're supposed to be like smart kid in that group, but you can't. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, people have a way of keeping you in a certain box, even if you wanted to do something else. And you're aware that like, well, I can't say that because I'll piss everybody off. You know, and then like, it's just you can't really explain why that is, but it just is that way. For high school in general has social norms for different people.
Good. All right, excellent. You're there for, you're subject to certain social norms, certain social expectations, High school is a great example of this, but really, I'd like to say by the time you get to my age, it's irrelevant, it's not true. But you sort of find yourself expected to behave in certain ways, you find yourself expected to fulfill certain roles, and at times that's natural, but at times it's not, right? Look, most of you are teenagers, you know what it's like to walk into a room and be awkwardly disconnected from what you're doing and self-conscious. But that's something that happens at all sorts of stages of life for all sorts of reasons. You walk into a job interview, and maybe it goes great, you're just chatting and so forth, but maybe it's like you're sitting there thinking, oh man, what's the person gonna ask? What's gonna happen next? What am I gonna say? And then you find yourself saying certain things. Even at the same time, you can be thinking, oh, that's a dumb thing to say. Why am I saying this? That was a stupid joke. Let me get out of this. How do I get out of this, right? And that kind of thing can happen all the time. And so, you're right, there are certain, I mean, here's one great way to bring this out. Just put yourself in a setting where there are two different sets of expectations. There are your old high school friends meeting your new college friends. Or your parents show up, right? And you're introducing them to your friends. Or, you know, blah, blah, blah. There are lots of settings like that where it's like, oh, wow, there are two sets of norms operating here, and now what do I do? And that's a quick way to feel like, hold on a second, I'm really separated from the puppet that's actually doing these things. Somebody else wanted it? Yeah.
This is based off of the idea of like a mask slipping, like there's the internal you that's the puppeteer, and then there's the mask that's the puppet. If the idea of like your identity is fluid, how do you know which is the mask that's slipping, or even if the real you is showing it's not just another mask?
Oh, wonderful question. How do you know what's you and what's the mask? Right? How do you identify the puppeteer? There's something about this image that actually is somewhat comforting, because even if my body is the puppet, I can feel like I'm the puppeteer, right? In fact, Descartes has this famous image in the Meditations of what I truly am. After saying, you know, I think, I am, that gives me the essence of myself as a thinking thing. He then says, I am in my body like a sailor in a ship, okay? And that gives you the sense that, okay, good, I'm at least the puppet master, right? I'm like the sailor in the ship. I'm there at the wheel determining where the ship goes. And in fact, Pirandello's image is a lot more depressing than that. Because then I can say, well, at least I can say something about who I am. I'm the guy in control. I'm the one who's steering the ship. Yeah.
When you're a puppeteer, just want you to think that you're in control, just to try and really create peace of mind and get you going instead of constantly questioning and then knowing that.
Yes, good. Why should there be a puppeteer at all? And why not think that the identity of the puppeteer is itself part of the mask, itself part of the illusion? Maybe it's an illusion, right, that I'm in fact in control of this ship. Maybe I'm not. Maybe there's nothing there that's in control of this ship. Maybe it's just being battered about by these sort of waves of, how far can I extend this storm imagery, of these external forces that have nothing to do with who I really am. Yeah.
I mean, towards that question, if you did know what was the mask and what was the color, if you could distinguish that, then it would start to be possible to at least make a theory, or at least to start forming correlations and causal links. So,
Right.
Wouldn't the answer to that be that, like, if you believe Pirandello's philosophy, then you really can't tell?
Yes, good. In that respect, this isn't a great image, really, because to the extent that we can distinguish the puppeteer from the puppet, we've got a way of distinguishing the true reality from the mask. And if we could do that, it wouldn't be nearly so difficult, right? Who are you really? That's right, I'd know what the mask is, and I could take the mask away and say, well, there's the thing, there's the real puppeteer, and so that's what would give me the answer to who I am. I'm that guy, I'm the sailor in the ship. But we have no reason to be confident, given what he said, that that's right. So this is, after all, just the manager who admits he doesn't know what's going on, doesn't understand, giving us his story and an image of what this might be like. But I don't think we should take this too seriously, partly because we can, after all, looking, tell who is the puppeteer and who's the puppet. And in this case, yeah, there's no reason to think we can do that. Yeah.
Like, what do you think about all this puppeteer stuff? Because usually we just sit here and try to figure it out, and we like whatever, like shoot off shots and see what happens. But, like, what do you think about this?
What do I think about this puppet stuff?
Yeah. Yeah.
God.
What's your take?
I think you are all puppets and I'm the master. No, I'm joking. You know, I think in a way underlying this is a really good point. which is that who we truly are and what we truly are isn't fully captured by the various roles we play, the activities we engage in, the various norms we follow, the values we have. We are something beyond all of that. And in fact, it's not just we're beyond each thing, we're beyond the totality of that. You haven't captured me by just describing me in various ways. I haven't captured you by finding out that you're a student and that you're majoring in such and such and you hope to do this and blah, blah, blah. None of that can capture who we truly are. But then he goes further and says, well, in fact, when we try to investigate what we really are, that's just unintelligible. That's irrational, right? It's just this bubbling mass. I don't know. I look inside myself, and my own view is, actually, it's a pretty reasonable guy. I don't find this bubbling mass of blind instinct and so on. There's some element of that. But then again, I'm not a very passionate person. I don't know. I'm a sort of highly reasonable guy. I act on the basis of principle most of the time. One of my former bosses, the dean, when I was department chair, just said, yeah, Dan's a straight shooter. What you see is what you get. And that's more or less true for me. I don't think there's this bubbling hidden thing underneath me, at least most of the time. But, you know, that may be just that I'm, what? Kind of boring. Professor. Presbyterian type. I mean, I don't know, maybe. I'm not sure what to say about this. Because I would like to think, no, there is some way of understanding this more basic thing. Yes, of course, there are roles we play and activities we engage in, but I would hope there's some way of understanding who I truly am that goes beyond that. And yet, it is a very hard thing to articulate. So yeah, if you want my own reaction, I'm sort of with Pirandello part of the way. Partly, I don't think this is a great image even for his view, but I don't love it as an image for myself either. Most of the time, I think I am actually really the one who's doing this, and not just controlling myself as a puppet. Anyway, I'll try to come back to this. There is this sense of infinite absurdity. The characters come on and want to tell their story, right? And the manager's upset about this. He says, "Will you oblige me by going away? We haven't time to waste with mad people." And the father says, sweetly, "Oh, sir, you know well that life is full of infinite absurdities, which strangely enough don't even need to appear plausible, since they are true." Okay? There is a view here that is actually underlying this, a philosophical view that was common in German philosophy by the end of the 19th century, and persisted, in fact, had been published just a few years before this play came out, and fortuitously just before the First World War. It came out in 1911. It was by a German philosopher named Hans Weiger. It was a book called The Philosophy of As If. And what he does is argue that if you examine the nature of the world, you find that you just get faced with contradictions at every turn. And so what that tells you is that the whole world is an illusion. It is all contradictory. The contradictions indicate the illusory nature of everything. And so he says, yeah, think about your own perceptions. There are contradictions, and you find out it's all an illusion. He thinks this is true of mathematics, that it's true of the sciences, it's true of everything. Okay? And so I think Pirandello is deeply influenced by this idea that the whole world is really pretend. It is all a pretense. It is all, if you think about it hard enough, really a contradictory mess. And that's what he thinks is really the indication that none of this deep down makes any sense. It's full of infinite absurdities. What we're doing is creating these appearances, creating this world of pretense, but its contradictory nature shows us that it can't be real, that it's just pretense. The manager says, what the devil is he talking about? The father says, I say that to reverse the ordinary process may well be considered a madness, to create credible situations in order that they may appear true. But permit me to observe that if this be madness, it's the sole raison d'etre of your profession, gentlemen. The actors are hurt and perplexed. But of course, that is what actors do, right? They try to make such situations seem believable so that you can suspend disbelief and actually believe that the action going on the stage is real. And he's saying, look, this idea of pretending, you're actors. This is, of course, what you do. I'm saying everybody does this. So the manager says, so our profession seems worthy of madmen then? The father says, well, to make seem true that which isn't true without any need for show to the word. Isn't that your mission, gentlemen, to give life to fantastic characters on the stage? Well, yes, that's what acting is all about. That's what plays are all about. That's what literature is all about. But also, he's saying, that's what life is all about. Really, to construct these illusions. these things that seem true, which really aren't true. And so you get this sense of absurdity in the play. Here is a crucial moment where the characters are, as you can see, looking away, looking downcast, unwilling at that point in the play to actually do any more than hint at the dark underlying reality. Yeah, I know, I actually am impressed by the red heads too. But anyway, yes, each of us, when he appears before his fellows, is clothed in a certain dignity. But every man knows what unconfessable things pass within the secrecy of his own heart. One gives way to the temptation only to rise from it again afterwards, with a great eagerness to reestablish one's dignity as if it were a tombstone to place on the grave of one's shame, and a monument to hide and sign the memory of our weaknesses. Everyone's in the same place. Some folks haven't the courage to say certain things, that's all. So the idea is every one of us has inside us things that are too horrible to contemplate, too miserable to allow into consciousness, as Freud would think. And here, so we're forced to construct these masks, these illusions, these appearances, to hide the true nature of that horror from ourselves. Every one of us has these unconfessable things in our hearts. Now, the stepdaughter says, well, all appear to have the courage to do them, though. The father says, yes, but in secret, okay? That's why it's so difficult to reveal. People hide it. They'll do it, but they'll do it in secret. Now, the stepdaughter at one point says, all these intellectual complications make me sick, disgust me. All this philosophy that uncovers the beast in man and then seeks to save him, excuse him. I can't stand it, sir. When a man seeks to simplify life bestially, throwing aside every relic of humanity, every chaste aspiration, every pure feeling, all sense of ideality, duty, modesty, shame, then nothing is more revolting and nauseous than a certain kind of remorse. Crocodile's tears, that's what it is. So, in effect, the argument here is, look, Pirandello, you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. You're trying to say it's all unintelligible. And look, here's my theory of it. Let me explain it by means of my philosophy. The father says, for the drama lies in this, in the conscience that I have, each one of us has. He says, we believe this conscience to be a single thing, but actually it's many-sided. It's not one thing. There's one for this person and another for that, diverse consciences. And not only one for each person, but really our conscience does different things depending on the need we have to cover up certain things. So, here is, I think, the underlying picture. The self is really fragmented. There isn't one thing. This is why the puppeteer image, and why Descartes' image of the sailor in a ship is in a certain sense really misleading. Because he says, look, that implies that I am one person. I am one pilot steering this ship throughout life. That I am one puppeteer maneuvering the puppet. But actually that's not true. I look inside myself and I find that I'm fragmented. I've got this illusion of being one person for all, having a personality that's unique. And he said, it's not true, okay? We perceive this when something we do is suspended, caught up in the air on a kind of hook. We perceive that all of us wasn't in that act. And in fact, it would be an atrocious injustice to judge us by that action alone. And yet, we realize that, of course, we've done that. But the self is really fragmented. There isn't just one me. There's the me of that moment. Yeah.
Of course, the father was interesting because he was like the main venue for Pirandello's philosophy. Not main venue. What word am I? The main source for Pirandello's philosophy in the play. It seemed like, but on the other hand, he was corrupted in himself. He wasn't unbiased in giving it. He said that as an excuse for having tried to prostitute out his stepdaughter to himself unknowingly. But he says that's why he's saying this. He's saying you can't judge me by that action. So like Pirandello, it seems like willingly corrupts his own philosophy by filtering it through the father's work.
Well, that's true because we're getting this through the father, right? And the father does admittedly have a lot to hide. And he has reason to deny that he's one person because to the extent that his true self is revealed by that act, that seems horrendous, right? And so maybe we shouldn't take that this seriously as really reflecting Pirandello's view. Maybe this is just an attempt to escape responsibility. But, oh yes, there's another production. But the father basically says, look, we find ourselves strange to one another. We find that we're living in an atmosphere of moral desolation. Okay? Now, there is, when faith is lacking, well, yeah, what do? We substitute ourselves for this faith. But, there's I'm out of time almost. One more minute, so I'm frightened. How can I sum it up in one more minute? Well, the father says, look here, you've got to be the author. The father is looking for somebody to take responsibility, somebody to actually take control, to be puppeteer, right? The manager says, I? What are you talking about? The father says, yes, you, why not? It's because I've never been an author, that's why. And so really the question that's posed at the end is, can anyone be author? Can anyone take responsibility? Is anybody in a position to do better than the father is doing here by saying, yeah, look, just me with lots of diverse personalities, you can't pin those actions on me, it's not really my true nature. Well, is that just an attempt to evade responsibility? Is there any way for anyone to take responsibility? And there I think the play really leaves that hanging as a question. I don't see an answer. But that's the question Pirandello faces us with, and it's a question that becomes even more crucial once people go through the experience of the Second World War and the massive moral betrayals that are involved. Next time we'll return to the topic of the arts.